Hi everyone, this video is on solving equations by factoring. First thing to talk about is the zero product rule. For any real numbers a and b, if a times b equals 0, then a equals 0 or b equals 0. So if we multiply two things together, the only way to get 0 is if one of them is 0 or if both of them is 0. Okay, so we're going to use, what's a principle? The principle is zero products. Set each factor equal to 0. Okay, so we have x times x plus 8 equals 0. We're going to write each factor equal to 0. And this is only true because it has a 0 and it's two factors. It's being multiplied to equal 0. Okay, so you just write x equals 0 or x plus 8 equals 0. And then we solve. Okay, the first one there's nothing to do because it's already x equals 0. The second one, we got to get x by itself. So subtract 8 on both sides. And then that's our answer. So we have two answers. We usually put them in braces, smallest to largest. All right, so braces, -8 first and then 0 second. Okay, here's our next equation. 2x minus 3 times x plus 5 equals 0. So we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve each equation. So you're going to write down 2x minus 3 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. Now we solve both equations. Add 3 to both sides, and then divide by 2. You can leave it as an improper fraction. In algebra, we could usually leave numbers as improper fractions unless it's a word problem. Then you would want to change it to a mixed number, 1.5, or if it's a money, 1.5, $1.50. Okay, the next one, just subtract 5 on both sides, and you get x equals -5. So those are our two answers, -5 and 3/2. Okay, here's our next example. 5x minus 7 times 4x plus 3 equals 0. Remember to try and give it a shot on your own. Pause the video, work it out, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so we're going to use the principle of zero products, the zero product rule. We're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So 5x minus 7 equals 0, or 4x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, add 7 to both sides. 0 plus 7 is 7, so 5x equals 7. And then divide both sides by 5. So x equals 7/5. Notice the answer, it's the same number as the original binomial. It's the same numbers from the original problem. It's the second number over the first number with the opposite sign. Second number over first number, opposite sign. So can you guess what the next answer is going to be without doing the work? Again, it's the second number, that's 3, over the first number, 4, with the opposite sign, negative. So -3/4. Sometimes it's okay to do a few steps in your head. There tends to be a lot of work in math. Okay, let's do the work anyway. So -3 on both sides. So that's 4x equals -3. That's by 4. That will give you negative 3/4. Put it in order, negative 3/4 and 7/5. Okay, this one has three factors. We're still going to use the same property. We're going to set each factor equal to 0. So 3x equals 0, 2x minus 5 equals 0, and 2x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, how do you solve the first one? You just divide by 3 on both sides, right? And that still gives you 0. So anytime we have an x with a number in front of it, like 3x or 7x, 12x, negative 5x, it's always going to give you a 0. If there's not an x, and you just have a number like 3, then 3 wouldn't equal 0. It doesn't make sense, so then you could just disregard the number. That is when we're solving equations. Okay, next equation. Add 5 to both sides, and then divide by 2, so we get 5/2. Third equation. Same thing, just subtract 5 on both sides, still divide by 2, and we get negative 5/2. Now write your answer in braces. Make sure to put it from smallest to largest. So negative 5/2, 0, and then positive 5/2. Okay, so here's a procedure for factoring equations and using the zero product rule. Okay, if it's already factored, that's what we just did. If the problem is already factored and there's a 0 on one side of the equation, again what we just did, then we go right to the zero product rule. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Okay, now step 2 here we haven't done yet. If the problem is not factored or does not have a 0 on one side of the equation, then, so a couple of little steps here. Multiply any products of polynomials. So if there's parentheses, you got to get rid of the parentheses. Again, this is only if there's not a 0 on one side. Let's say there's a 5 on the right-hand side. If the left-hand side is factored already, it's too soon. You have to multiply it out. That's what A says. Now B says, bring all the terms to one side and collect like terms. So there's a 5 on the right-hand side, we got to bring it over to the left-hand side to get a 0. That's what we're doing. We've got to get a 0 on one side. And then we're going to rearrange into standard form, or descending order. Then we factor. Lastly, we could use a zero product rule. Alright, so let's do some examples. 2x squared minus 5x minus 12. So first of all, is there a 0 on the right-hand side? Yeah, that's good. Is the left-hand side factored already? No. Is it in order? Yes. So what are we going to do? Right, we're going to factor it. Okay, so we got to factor that trinomial, and we've worked on factoring trinomials. I use the grouping method, the AC method, but you could use any other method that you wanted to. Some people use an X or a box, some kind of diamond, whatever works for you. Okay, multiply the first number and the last number. That gives us negative 24. List the factors. See from there? Good. And then it's a minus 24. So we want to find the pair that subtracts to be the middle number. Which pair will subtract to be 5? Right, the 3 and 8. And then attach our signs. Positive 3 and negative 8. Right, that'll give us a negative 5. Now we separate that into 4 terms using the pair that we just found. The order doesn't matter which one you put first, the positive 3x or negative 8x. And now we factor by grouping. So what can we factor from the first pair? Right, an x. So we factor out an x, that'll give us 2x plus 3. How about the second pair? Right, negative 4. It's negative because the first term is negative. Again, that's 2x plus 3. Those match. So it's 2x plus 3 times x minus 4. And then bring down the equal 0. Now we're right back to what we were doing before. You can either use that pattern, second number over first number, opposite sign, or show the word. X plus 3 equals 0, or x minus 4 equals 0. Solve each equation. The first equation gives us x equals negative 3 halves. Second equation, x equals 4. So negative 3 halves and 4. Okay, this one's very similar to the last problem. Why don't I try to give this one a shot on your own? Pause the video and work it out. Okay, so we have 0 on the right hand side. That's great. The left hand side is in order. It's in descending order, so we need to factor it. It's a trinomial. We're going to multiply the first number times the last number. That's negative 30. List the factors. 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. Because it's a negative 30, we want to look for the pair that subtracts to be 13. Many times people will try to use 3 and 10, but 3 and 10 does not subtract to be 13. 3 and 10 subtracts to be 7. If it was a plus 30, then you would want the numbers that add to be 13, and then you would use 3 and 10. So in this case, we're not going to use 3 and 10, we're going to use 2 and 15. And in the signs, we want a negative 13. So that will be positive 2 and negative 15. Okay, separate your trinomial into 4 terms using the pair. Then factor by grouping. You can factor in x from the first pair. That'll give you 3x plus 2. And then from the second pair, you could factor a 5. Oh, but the first term is negative, so it'll be negative 5. Again, 3x plus 2. Good thing those match. If they don't match, then we've made a mistake. We've got to figure out where we went wrong. So it'll be 3x plus 2 times x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, now set them both equal to 0. Or you can use second number over first number, opposite sign. First one gives you x equals negative 2/3. And the second one will give you x equals 5. So those are our two answers. Negative 2/3 and 5. Okay, our next example. The equation must be in factored form with 0 on one side to utilize the zero product rule. Right? We have to have 0 on one side. Do we have 0 on one side? No. So we have to get a 0 on one side. Let's get it on the right-hand side. You always want your x squared term to be positive. It's usually easiest that way. All right, so subtract the 28x on both sides. So when you move the 28x to the left-hand side, it'll become a minus 28x. Now we have 0 on the right-hand side. Yeah, now we can factor. So what can we factor on the left-hand side? Yeah, 4 and an x. 4 goes into 4 and 4 goes into 28. And they both have at least one x. So factor out of 4x, and that'll give you x minus 7. Now we can use the zero product rule. On the first equation, divide by 4. And on the second equation, add 7 to the others to both sides. That gives you x equals 7. So we got two answers, 0 and 7. Okay, so on this problem, a little bit different. We had to get 0 on one side, then we could factor it. Okay, here's our next example. 12x squared minus 7x equals 10. We have the same issue here, right? We don't have a 0 on the right-hand side. So you need to move that 10 to the left-hand side. So that'll give us 12x squared minus 7x minus 10 equals 0. Okay, now we're going to factor the trinomial. Multiply the first number and the last number, that's negative 120. And then we got to find a pair that subtracts to be 7. So you see, it's kind of tough sometimes, right? That's why I like to write down all the products, 1 times 120, 2 times 60, etc. Because if I'm methodical, I'm very likely to find the right pair. If I just kind of guess, start thinking in my head and guessing, I might not find that right pair. Okay, so here we go. So 120, I listed all the factors, and which of those pairs will subtract to give us 7? Yes, the 8 and 15. See that 8 and 15, like very few people are gonna like, oh yeah, 8 times 15 is 120. Okay, so 8 and 15, positive 8, negative 15. Factor out of 4x from the first pair. And how about the second pair? Right, negative 5. And the two binomials inside the parentheses match, so that's good. 3x plus 2 times 4x minus 5. Now we can use our zero product rule. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So the first solution is negative 2/3. And the second solution is 5/4. Okay, this one has multiple issues, right? We don't have a 0 on the right-hand side, and it's already factored. So we do like that it's factored, but it's factored too soon. We have to have a 0 for us to factor it. Okay, so what we're going to do is unfactor it. So FOIL, or multiply it. Then bring the 5 to the left-hand side, and then refactor it with a 0 on the right-hand side. Okay, So multiply the left-hand side. So x times 2x is 2x squared. X times 3 is 3x, and then 3 times 2x is 6x, so that gives us a 9x in the middle. And then the last term is 3 times 3, which is 9. Now, subtract the 5 on both sides. That gives us 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 equals 0. Now we could factor it. 2 times 4 is 8. I didn't list the possibles. It was 8 and 1, 2 and 4, and we use 8 and 1, and then factor by grouping, or you just kind of look at it and put it in. Okay, 2x plus 1 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0. We get two answers, -1/2 and -4. Kind of skipped a couple steps there, but I think you got it. So those are two answers, -1/2 and -4. How about one more problem? Oh, a word problem. Okay. I know we get a little nervous with word problems. Your pulse increases, a little sweat comes down the side of your face, heart rate increases, but we're very relaxed. Yes, okay. When we do a word problem, keep in mind it's the same thing we were doing. They just put some words into the problem. An object is thrown upward with an initial velocity of 80 feet per second off the top of a 576-foot building. So think about somebody throwing a baseball up in the air from the top of a building. The height in feet, the height h in feet of the object after t seconds, so t stands for seconds, it's our time, is given by the quadratic equation h equals -16t squared plus 80t plus 576. When will the object hit the ground? Should be a question mark. Okay. So we have an equation, and we want to know when is it going to hit the ground. So the 80 that's in the problem, initial velocity, that's in the equation. And the 576, that's in the equation too. So you don't have to worry about those two numbers that are given. We just need that equation. Well, when will it hit the ground? That's the height, right? What's the height when it hits the ground? Well, the height is 0 feet. Okay. So all we're doing is you're going to replace the h with 0. Okay? So you put 0 in place of h. Okay, now we're right back to what we were doing. You might not like the 0 on the left-hand side. I don't feel comfortable with the 0 on the left-hand side. I like it on the right-hand side. So go ahead and just scratch it out and put the equals 0 on the right-hand side. Okay, now we need a factor. Is there a GCF? Yeah, none of the last problems had a GCF, right? This one does. I'm sorry, that's not true. We did have some problems with the GCF, like the 4x. Okay, so what goes into 16, 80, and 576? Well, maybe it's 16. Check on your calculator. 16 goes into 80, and 16 goes into 576. Yeah, it does. So you're going to factor out 16, actually a -16, because the first term is negative. So that gives you t squared minus 5t minus 36. Okay, now that -16 we're not going to worry about, but we've got to factor that trinomial. Let's see, 36 is 9 and 4, 6 and 6, 12 and 3. I think it was 9 and 4, right? Yeah. So t minus 9 and t plus 4. If you want to do the grouping, you still can. I just put the numbers right in. So I knew it was 9 and 4. That subtracts to be 5. And the 9 has to be negative, and the 4 has to be positive. It's always easier when it starts out with a t squared or an x squared, when the coefficient of the squared term is 1. Okay, set each factor equal to 0. Now the first one, negative 60 equals 0, that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to do there. The second one, we could add 9 to both sides, and the third one, we could subtract 4 on both sides. So we have 3 answers. Well, 2 actually. T equals 9, and t equals negative 4. Remember what t stands for. It's time. It's seconds. So t equals 9, that stands for 9 seconds. It'll take 9 seconds for this ball to be thrown up and to come back down and hit the ground. That makes sense. How about t equals negative 4? It takes negative 4 seconds to, yeah, that doesn't make sense, right? So we only have one answer. That would be t equals 9. Okay, that was it for this lesson. I'll see you here for the next one.